The gymnasium doors burst open, and every head turned. Marcus stood frozen in the parking lot, watching his mother's rusted, faded blue sedan sputter to a stop right in front of the entrance, right in front of everyone from his graduating class. The engine backfired once, loud enough to make half the crowd laugh. Someone shouted, "Is that thing even street legal?" Marcus wanted to disappear into the pavement. His mother rolled down the window, waving with a proud smile stretched across her tired face. "Marcus! Over here, baby!" He didn't wave back. He just stared at the ground, jaw clenched, humiliation burning through his chest like fire. He was 18 years old, and in less than 60 seconds, his mother's 22-year-old car had undone every ounce of social standing he'd spent 4 years building. His friend Derek elbowed him, laughing under his breath. "Bro, is your mom picking you up or towing you away?" Someone else pulled out a phone, angling it just slightly toward the sedan, and Marcus felt his stomach drop at the thought of it ending up online by morning. He forced a tight smile, said a hurried goodbye to no one in particular, and crossed the parking lot with his head down, cap and gown bunched in his fist, wishing more than anything that the ground would simply open up and swallow him whole before anyone else could get a good look. That night, he didn't say a single word to his mother the entire ride home. 10 years earlier, none of this would have mattered. Marcus was 8 years old, and to him, that car wasn't an embarrassment. It was a spaceship, a fortress, a place where his mother sang off-key to the radio and let him roll the windows down even in winter because he liked the wind on his face. His father had left when Marcus was 5, disappearing one afternoon with a duffel bag and never coming back, not even for a birthday card. His mother, Elaine, had been left with a mortgage, a toddler, and a factory job that barely covered groceries some months. But young Marcus never noticed the struggle. All he saw was his mother, exhausted after a double shift, still finding the energy to make pancakes shaped like his initials on Saturday mornings. All he saw was warmth. He didn't know yet what poverty looked like from the outside. He only knew what love felt like from the inside. What Marcus didn't know back then, what he wouldn't learn until much, much later, was that his father hadn't simply left. He'd left behind more than an empty side of the bed. He'd left behind almost $4,000 in unpaid debt under Elaine's name, co-signed years earlier on a credit card neither of them could have predicted would be maxed out and abandoned. Elaine discovered it 3 weeks after he was gone, opening a collections notice at the kitchen table with baby Marcus asleep in the next room. She never told anyone, not even Rosalind, not for years. She simply sat down that night, made a list on the back of an envelope. Mortgage, groceries, daycare, debt, and quietly began working 2 shifts a week longer than her schedule required, telling her supervisor she just needed the hours. She sold her wedding ring to a pawn shop 6 months later, not out of anger, but out of arithmetic. It covered 2 months of daycare. She never replaced it. She wore a thin silver band from a discount store instead, and when Marcus, years later, asked why she never remarried, she always laughed and said, "Too busy raising you, baby," which was true. But not the whole truth. The whole truth was that trust, once broken that completely, takes far longer to rebuild than $4,000 ever could. By the time Marcus turned 12, things had started to shift. Kids at school had newer shoes, newer backpacks, phones with cracked-free screens. Marcus started noticing the differences the way a person notices a draft in a house they used to think was warm. He came home one afternoon and asked his mother, almost casually, "Why do we still have this old car? Tyler's mom just got a Honda." Elaine, chopping vegetables at the counter, didn't look up right away. "This car still runs, doesn't it? Gets us where we need to go." Marcus shrugged. "Yeah, I guess." He didn't push it further, not yet. But something had planted itself in him that day. A quiet, creeping awareness that his family was different, and not in a good way. There was a specific afternoon Marcus never forgot, even years later, even after everything else faded. He was 13, waiting outside the middle school gym after basketball tryouts, sweating, hopeful, one of only 12 names posted on the callback list taped to the door. 3 boys from the team, kids whose parents drove leased SUVs and dropped $40 on new cleats without blinking, were huddled near the curb when Elaine's sedan rattled into view, backfiring once on the turn into the lot. "Yo, Marcus, your ride's here," one of them called out, grinning. Not cruelly exactly, but not kindly either. the particular carelessness of kids who'd never once had to think about money. Does that thing even pass inspection? Marcus forced a laugh, the kind that costs more than it looks like it costs, and jogged toward the car faster than necessary, hoping speed might somehow shrink the moment. In the car, Elaine asked brightly, "How'd tryouts go, baby?" "Fine," Marcus muttered, staring out the window. "Just fine? I made the team." "Marcus, that's wonderful! We should celebrate! Ice cream on the way home?" "I'm not really hungry," he said, even though he was, because some part of him had decided that afternoon that being seen with his mother in that car, celebrating anything, only invited more attention he didn't want. By 14, the comments from classmates had sharpened into something crueler. "Is that your mom's car, or did you steal it from a junkyard?" One boy sneered during pickup, loud enough for a group of girls to laugh along. Marcus felt his ears go hot. He mumbled something back, but the sting lingered the rest of the day. That evening, he snapped at his mother for the first time. "Can you park down the street next time?" "Not right at the entrance?" Elaine blinked, confused. "Why? What's wrong with right here?" Marcus looked away. "Nothing. Just people look." His mother's face changed for a moment, something flickering behind her eyes that Marcus was too young and too wrapped up in his own embarrassment to name. She simply nodded. "Okay, baby, I'll park down the street." She never asked why again. She just quietly adjusted, the way she always did, without complaint, without explanation. At 16, Marcus got his driver's permit, and the car situation became unbearable in a whole new way. He begged his mother constantly. "Mom, can we at least trade it in? I'll take anything. Even a used Corolla. Anything but this." Elaine would sigh, rubbing her temples after a long shift. "We'll see, baby. Things are tight right now." Marcus didn't understand tight. He saw his friends' parents pulling up in SUVs and pickup trucks with chrome rims, and all he could think was that his mother simply didn't try hard enough, didn't care enough, was content living in embarrassment while he suffered the consequences socially. He didn't know about the second job she'd quietly taken on weekends, cleaning offices downtown after her factory shift ended. He didn't know she'd started skipping her own doctor's appointments to save the copay. He only knew the car hadn't changed, and in his mind, that meant she hadn't tried. The humiliation compounded during his sophomore year of high school, when Marcus started talking to a girl named Priya. She was smart, kind, from a family that seemed impossibly put together. A father who was a dentist, a mother who drove a shiny black minivan with heated seats. Marcus liked Priya more than he'd liked anyone before, and for weeks, things were going well. Then Priya invited him to a family dinner. Marcus panicked instantly. "Can Priya's dad drop me off after, and can you just meet me at the corner instead of the driveway?" he asked his mother. Elaine paused, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You don't want me to see where she lives?" "It's not that," Marcus lied. "I just don't want to make things complicated." Elaine studied his face for a long moment, and something in her expression told Marcus she understood exactly what complicated meant. She agreed anyway. She always agreed. The dinner went fine until Priya's father asked, casually, over dessert, "So what does your mother drive, Marcus? I don't think I've seen her car around." Marcus felt his stomach twist. "Oh, it's an older model. Nothing fancy." Priya's father chuckled lightly, not unkindly. "Older models can be reliable. My first car was a beater too." But Marcus barely heard the reassurance. All he could think about was the exact moment the corner pickup would happen, and whether Priya would see the car from the window, and what she'd think of him afterward. When Elaine's headlights appeared at the corner exactly on time, Marcus practically sprinted out the door before anyone could walk him out. He didn't say goodbye properly. He just left, ashamed of an entire evening that had otherwise gone perfectly, poisoned entirely by his own fear of being seen as poor. Things reached a boiling point on prom night, senior year. Marcus had saved for months to rent a decent suit, determined that at least one part of the night would look the way he wanted it to. His date, a girl named Ashley, lived in a neighborhood with manicured lawns and identical brick houses. When Elaine pulled up in the old sedan to pick them up for the customary parent photos before prom tradition, Marcus felt his whole body go rigid. Ashley's mother, holding a camera, glanced at the car for half a second. Just half a second. But Marcus caught it. He caught the flicker of judgment, real or imagined, and something inside him cracked. In the car afterward, halfway to the venue, Marcus finally exploded. Why can't you just get a normal car? Everyone else's parents drive normal cars. I work hard, I get good grades, I do everything right, and you make me look poor in front of everyone. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Every single time? Elaine's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't yell back. She never yelled back. She just said, very quietly, "I'm sorry it embarrasses you," and drove the rest of the way in silence. The graduation night car ride home replayed in Marcus's mind for years afterward, though not for the reasons it should have. He remembered the silence stretching the entire 20-minute drive, his mother's hands steady on the wheel, her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to let him see whatever was happening behind them. He remembered pulling into the driveway and reaching for the door handle before the car had even fully stopped, desperate to escape the discomfort of his own making. "Marcus?" Elaine said quietly, just as his hand touched the handle. He paused, not turning around. "You worked so hard these 4 years. I am so proud of you. I hope one day you know how proud." Marcus mumbled something non-committal. "Yeah, thanks," and went inside without looking back, missing entirely the way his mother sat alone in the driveway for another 10 minutes afterward. Engine off, forehead resting against the steering wheel, before she finally came in herself. Marcus didn't apologize that night. He didn't apologize the next morning either. In fact, the resentment only grew heavier over his final months of high school, calcifying into something he carried like a grudge he couldn't quite name. He told himself it wasn't really about the car. It was about respect, about his mother not caring enough to fix something that mattered so much to him. He never once asked why. He never once considered that a woman who worked 2 jobs, raised a child alone, kept a roof over both their heads without a single missed mortgage payment in 13 years might have priorities he simply couldn't see. And so when graduation day arrived and that same rusted, faded blue sedan pulled up in front of the entire senior class, Marcus reached his breaking point. He barely spoke to his mother that whole summer. When the fall came, he packed his bags for college 2 states away, hugged her stiffly at the door, and left without looking back. There was one final incident before Marcus left for college that summer, one he rarely let himself think about, but that lodged itself deep regardless. He'd landed an interview for a summer internship at a marketing firm downtown. His first real professional opportunity, the kind of thing that could set the tone for his entire career trajectory. He didn't have his own car yet, so his mother offered to drive him. "I'll drop you 2 blocks away," she said gently, already anticipating his answer before he could ask. Marcus nodded, grateful and ashamed of his own gratitude at the same time. But that morning, the sedan wouldn't start, the battery finally giving out after years of quiet strain. And Elaine, without missing a beat, called a coworker for a ride, handed Marcus bus fare from her own wallet, and told him, "Take the number 14. It drops you right at the corner. You'll make it with time to spare." He did make it, barely, sweating through his one good shirt, and he got the internship. He never thanked her properly for that morning. He was too busy being relieved. No one from the firm had seen the car at all. College became Marcus's reinvention. He worked part-time jobs, took out loans, scraped together enough to buy himself a used but respectable car during his junior year. Nothing flashy, but new enough, clean enough, nothing that would draw a single laugh in a parking lot. He built a life that looked, from the outside, entirely unremarkable, and to Marcus, unremarkable was the whole point. He called his mother on holidays, sent a card on her birthday, visited maybe once a year for a strained, polite 48 hours before finding an excuse to leave early. Elaine never pushed. She never asked him to visit longer, never guilted him about the distance, never once brought up the prom night blow-up or the years of quiet requests to park farther away. She simply asked how he was doing, told him she loved him, and let him go every single time without complaint. Marcus told himself this was normal. He told himself distance was just what happened when kids grew up. He never let himself consider that his mother might be lonely, or hurting, or carrying something he hadn't bothered to ask about in years. What Marcus wouldn't learn until much later was exactly how the collapse had happened. A coworker named Denise, who'd worked the factory floor alongside Elaine for nearly a decade, later told him the details gently, over coffee, the week after the hospital stay. She'd been favoring her left side for weeks, saying her chest felt tight some mornings, but she kept waving it off, said she couldn't afford to miss a shift with everything going on. Denise explained, stirring her coffee slowly. That morning, She'd already worked 4 hours straight without her usual break, said she wanted to bank the extra time for a doctor's visit she kept postponing. Around 11, she just went down, right there on the floor. Scared us all half to death. Marcus felt sick listening to it, imagining his mother collapsing alone among machinery and coworkers, having spent that entire morning quietly working through pain rather than risk losing hours she desperately needed. "Why didn't she just take the morning off?" he asked, more to himself than to Denise. Denise gave him a knowing, sad sort of smile. "Honey, I don't think that woman has taken an unnecessary day off in 15 years. She always said somebody was counting on her paycheck. I don't think she meant herself." 5 years passed like this, polite, distant, comfortable in its avoidance. Marcus landed a decent job as a project coordinator, dated on and off, built a small apartment life he was proud of. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, his phone rang. It was his Aunt Rosalind, his mother's older sister, and her voice was tight in a way that made Marcus's stomach drop before she even said the words. "Marcus, honey, your mother's in the hospital. She collapsed at work. You need to come home." Marcus was on a flight within 4 hours, his mind spinning through every worst-case scenario, gripped by a fear he hadn't expected to feel this intensely for a woman he'd spent years quietly avoiding. Before he even reached his mother's room, Rosalind caught him in the hallway, gripping his arm hard enough to make him stop walking. "Marcus, I need to tell you something before you go in there, because she'll never tell you herself." Her voice was low, urgent. "Your mother has been running herself into the ground for years. I've offered to help with money more times than I can count, and every single time, she says the same thing. I've got it handled. This is for Marcus." I didn't understand what she meant by that for the longest time. I do now. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "What do you mean, Aunt Roz?" Rosalind hesitated, glancing toward the closed door of Elaine's room, her eyes suddenly glassy. "That's not my story to tell, honey. But when you get a chance, ask her about the office cleaning job. Ask her what she's been doing every Friday and Saturday night since you were in the 3rd grade." She squeezed his arm once more, softer this time. "Your mother is the strongest person I have ever known in my life, Marcus, and I've watched her carry things alone that would have broken most people. Don't let her carry this alone anymore, whatever it turns out to be." Before Marcus could press further, a nurse called them both inside. When he arrived at the hospital, his mother was pale against the white sheets, an IV taped to the back of her hand, looking smaller than he remembered. "I'm fine, baby," she said the moment she saw him, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just overworked myself, that's all. The doctors are being dramatic." But the doctor pulled Marcus aside afterward, and the words he used were not dramatic in the slightest. Chronic exhaustion. Severe anemia. Untreated hypertension that had gone unmonitored for years because she hadn't been to a regular checkup. "Has your mother mentioned any financial stress?" the doctor asked carefully, flipping through several pages clipped to a metal chart. "She has 2 jobs listed on her intake form, plus what looks like a fairly aggressive monthly budget scrawled in the margins here. She must have filled this out herself while waiting to be seen. That's unusual for someone her age, and frankly, unusual for someone in her condition to still be managing at all." Marcus blinked, leaning forward. 2 jobs? She only ever mentioned the factory. I didn't know about anything else. The doctor glanced at his chart again, almost apologetic now, sensing he'd stumbled into something Marcus hadn't known. According to her file, she's been cleaning offices on weekends for at least the last decade, possibly longer. The notes reference it, going back further than our records here even cover. "I'd strongly recommend she cut back significantly, Mr. Whitfield. Her body has essentially been running on reserves it doesn't have anymore." Marcus thanked him numbly and sat down hard on the small plastic chair outside the room, the words "running on reserves" echoing uncomfortably in his mind. What Marcus couldn't have known, what no one had ever shown him directly, was what those Friday and Saturday nights had actually looked like. Elaine, finishing her factory shift at 4, driving straight to a downtown office building without stopping to eat, letting herself in through a service entrance with a key card clipped to her cleaning cart, emptying trash bins and empty cubicles long after the employees had gone home to their families, wiping down conference room tables under fluorescent lights, humming quietly to herself to keep from feeling the particular loneliness of a building emptied of everyone but her, taking her one short break of the night, sitting on an overturned bucket in a stairwell, eating a sandwich she'd packed that morning, checking her watch, calculating exactly how many more months until the next tuition payment was due, exactly how many more shifts stood between Marcus and the gap in his financial aid closing completely. She never once complained to a coworker, never once mentioned it to Marcus, never once let a single Sunday phone call carry even a hint of the exhaustion she carried home with her most nights, collapsing into bed, sometimes still in her work clothes because changing felt like one task too many. Marcus sat in the hospital hallway that night, stunned, turning the sentence over and over in his mind. A decade, possibly longer. He thought back to his teenage years, to every late Friday night his mother came home smelling faintly of industrial cleaner, and how he'd never once asked why. He'd been too busy resenting the car to notice the exhaustion behind his mother's eyes, too busy measuring his own embarrassment to measure the weight she'd quietly been carrying the entire time. The next morning, while his mother slept, Marcus drove to her house. The same small house he'd grown up in, still modest, still exactly as it had always been. He let himself in with the spare key hidden under the flower pot, a hiding spot that hadn't changed in 20 years. The house was quiet, dust settled over furniture that hadn't been rearranged since his childhood. He wandered into the small home office his mother used for bills, half out of curiosity, half out of a need to understand something he couldn't yet name. He wasn't entirely sure what he was looking for at first. Maybe just proof of the exhaustion the doctor had described, some overdue bill or stern collections letter that would explain the two jobs, the collapse, the years of quiet strain. He almost turned around twice, telling himself this was an invasion of her privacy, that whatever she hadn't told him was hers to keep. But something kept him rooted to the chair, some instinct that the answer to Rosalind's cryptic warning was sitting somewhere in this small, cluttered room. On the desk sat a stack of folders, neatly labeled in his mother's careful handwriting. He opened the first one, expecting mortgage statements or utility bills. Instead, he found a decade's worth of bank statements, and a pattern he hadn't expected. Automatic transfers every single month to an account labeled simply M College Fund. The transfers began the year Marcus turned 8. The same year, he now realized that she'd started that second cleaning job. Marcus's hands shook as he pulled out folder after folder. Tuition receipts from his university, paid in full every semester, receipts he'd never actually seen because he'd assumed. He'd simply assumed that the scholarship and loans he'd worked so hard for had covered everything himself. He dug further and found a letter from his university's financial aid office, dated the spring of his freshman year, confirming that an anonymous benefactor had covered the remaining balance of his tuition after his scholarship and loans fell short. Anonymous. Marcus had never once questioned where that gap had been filled. He had simply been relieved it had. He kept digging. Beneath the tuition folder was another, thinner one. Hospital bills, from when Marcus was 9 years old and had needed emergency surgery after a bad bike accident. A surgery Marcus barely remembered except for the cast on his arm afterward. The insurance they'd had back then had covered only a fraction. The remaining balance, nearly $11,000, had been paid off over 4 years in careful, disciplined installments. Installments that lined up exactly with the years Marcus remembered his mother saying no to a newer car, no to new furniture, no to almost everything except his needs. There was more. A folder labeled retirement, nearly empty except for a single statement showing a balance so small it barely qualified as savings at all. An account Elaine had started, then stopped contributing to, then never restarted. The withdrawals timed almost exactly with Marcus's junior year of college, the most expensive year of his entire degree. There was a life insurance policy, modest but deliberate, with Marcus listed as sole beneficiary. The premium payments never once missed across 15 years, despite everything else being cut to the bone. And tucked into the very back of the drawer, beneath all of it, was a small spiral notebook, its cover worn soft from handling, filled with Elaine's handwriting. Not a diary exactly, more like a ledger of small victories and quiet worries. Entries like, Marcus made honor roll again, put an extra $40 toward the hospital bill this month to celebrate. And later, Marcus got into his top choice school today, cried in the bathroom at work so he wouldn't hear me on the phone. Good tears. Scared tears too. Don't know how we'll cover the gap, but we will. We always do. Marcus read that entry 4 times before he could make himself keep going. At the very bottom of the stack was a single, worn envelope, yellowed slightly with age, his own childhood handwriting scrawled across the front. For Mom. Marcus opened it with trembling hands and found a crayon drawing he'd made at age 6. A stick figure version of himself and his mother standing beside a car, holding hands, a lopsided sun overhead. He remembered drawing it, vaguely, remembered proudly presenting it to his mother at the kitchen table and watching her tape it to the refrigerator, where it had stayed for years until it eventually disappeared sometime during his teenage years, quietly taken down. He now realized, probably around the same time he'd started asking her to park farther away. He hadn't even noticed it was gone. Underneath the drawing, in his mother's handwriting, added years later in blue pen. The ink slightly faded, suggesting she'd written it long before this particular hospital visit, long before any of this had come to light. Was a single sentence. I kept this car because every time I look at it, I remember exactly why I never let myself buy anything nicer. Every dollar I didn't spend on this car, I spent on him instead. I'd do it again 1,000 times over. Marcus read the sentence 3 times, each time feeling something inside his chest cave in a little further. 13 years of quiet, accumulated guilt finally finding somewhere to land. Marcus needed air. He walked 3 blocks to the small diner his mother had frequented for years, a place called Rosie's where she'd always ordered the same coffee, black, no sugar, and sat by the window on the rare mornings she had time to spare. The waitress behind the counter, an older woman named Carol who'd clearly worked there for decades, recognized him immediately. "You're Elaine's boy, aren't you, Marcus?" He nodded, surprised. "How's she doing? We heard about the hospital. Whole street's been asking." Marcus sat down slowly at the counter. "She's stable. Recovering." Carol shook her head, pouring him a coffee he hadn't ordered. "That woman. Lord, that woman. You know she paid off the Henderson's furnace bill 3 winters back? Whole family would have frozen. And when my grandson needed braces and insurance wouldn't cover it, she showed up at my door with an envelope. Wouldn't even let me thank her properly. Said, 'Pay it forward when you can. That's all I ask.'" Marcus sat frozen, the coffee cooling untouched in front of him. "I didn't know any of this," he admitted quietly. Carol studied him for a moment, not unkindly. "No, I don't imagine you would. That's not the kind of thing your mother ever wanted known. She always said the car and the house being modest wasn't a sacrifice if nobody had to watch her make it." She patted his hand once, gently. "You've got a remarkable mother, honey. I hope you know that." Marcus sat on the floor of his childhood home and wept, the drawing shaking in his hands. 13 years of resentment collapsing into something unbearably small and foolish in the face of what he was now holding. He thought of the prom night explosion, the corner pickups, the years of quiet distance. Every single moment he'd measured his mother's love against the age of her car instead of the depth of her sacrifice. He thought about how many nights she must have driven that same rusted sedan past car dealerships, past newer models she could have technically afforded if she'd only chosen herself over him even once, and how she never had. Not once. Not for 13 years. When Marcus returned to the hospital that evening, his mother was sitting up, sipping weak tea from a paper cup, looking stronger than she had that morning. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, half joking, studying his face. Marcus pulled a chair close to her bed and set the crayon drawing gently on her lap. Elaine's breath caught the moment she saw it. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In your office, along with everything else, Mom. The tuition, the hospital bills, the savings account with my name on it since I was 8 years old." Elaine's eyes filled instantly, and for the first time in Marcus's adult life, he watched his mother's composure completely dissolve. "I didn't want you to know," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't want it to feel like a debt. I wanted you to just have what you needed without ever feeling like you owed anyone for it, especially me." Marcus took her hand, careful of the IV line, and held it the way he used to as a small boy in the passenger seat of that old blue sedan. "Mom, I spent years being embarrassed by that car. I asked you to park down the street. I snapped at you on prom night. I barely called you for 5 years because some stupid, small part of me was still angry that you never upgraded it. Like that was somehow proof you didn't try hard enough. And this whole time, every dollar you didn't spend on that car was a dollar you spent making sure I never had to struggle the way you did." His voice broke completely on the last sentence. "I am so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry." Elaine squeezed his hand, tears sliding freely down her face now, but she was smiling too, a smile that held 13 years of quiet, unspoken love finally being seen. "You don't owe me an apology, baby. I never did any of it for a thank you. I did it because that's what you do when you love someone. You give them what they need, even when they don't understand the cost of it yet. I always knew that one day you'd understand. I just didn't know it would take a hospital bed to get us there." Marcus laughed through his tears, a broken, grateful sound. "You could have told me. Any time. You could have just told me why." "Would it have changed anything?" Elaine asked gently. "Would you have understood it the same way at 16, humiliated in a parking lot, as you understand it now, sitting here?" Marcus thought about it honestly, and the answer, painfully, was no. At 16, he wouldn't have understood sacrifice. He would have understood only the surface. The car, the shame, the social currency he thought mattered more than anything else in the world. It had taken 13 years, a hospital room, and a crayon drawing to teach him what his mother had known instinctively the whole time. That love isn't measured by what you show the world, but by what you're willing to give up quietly, without ever asking for credit. On the fourth night, Marcus asked her a question he'd never once thought to ask in 28 years. "Mom, where did you learn to do this? To just give like this, without ever needing anyone to know?" Elaine was quiet for a while, staring at the ceiling tiles above her hospital bed. "From my own mother, actually. Your grandmother. You barely remember her. You were 4 when she passed." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I remember pieces. A yellow kitchen. That's about it." Elaine smiled faintly. "She raised 5 of us on a seamstress's income after my father passed young. We never had much, but somehow, every single one of us finished school. Every single one of us had shoes that fit. Every single one of us never went to bed hungry. Not once, not even during the worst years. It wasn't until I was grown, going through her things after she died, that I found out she'd skipped meals herself more times than any of us ever knew, just so the portions on our plates always looked full. She never told us. Not once. I used to think that was almost cruel, keeping something like that hidden from the people who loved her most. Now I understand exactly why she did it, because I've done the same thing to you, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." She reached for Marcus's hand. "Sacrifice only feels like sacrifice from the outside, baby. From the inside, when you love someone enough, it just feels like Tuesday." In the days that followed, before Elaine was even discharged, Marcus found himself returning to the hospital every evening after work calls and errands, no longer treating the visits as an obligation to check off, but as something he actually wanted. On the third night, he brought the spiral notebook with him, setting it gently on her lap. "I read some of this," he admitted. "I hope that's okay." Elaine looked at the notebook for a long moment, running her thumb over the worn cover. "I always figured you'd find it eventually. Some part of me wanted you to, honestly. I just didn't know how to hand it to you myself." "Why not?" Marcus asked. "Because," Elaine said slowly, choosing her words with the same care she'd chosen everything else for 13 years. "If I told you, it would have felt like I was asking for something back. Gratitude, or guilt, or... I don't know. I didn't want you carrying any of that. I wanted you to grow up feeling like the world was generous to you, not like your mother was suffering on your behalf. Kids shouldn't have to carry that weight, so I carried it instead." Marcus had to look away for a moment, blinking hard. "I carried a different weight instead, Mom. I spent years being embarrassed by you, and this whole time you were the reason I had anything to be proud of at all." In the weeks that followed, something between them shifted permanently. Marcus started calling every Sunday evening, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to hear about her week. What she'd planted in the small garden bed out back, which coworker had retired, whether Carol at the diner had started serving that new pie flavor Elaine kept mentioning. He told his girlfriend, Sarah, about the discovery one night over dinner, struggling to get through the story without his voice catching more than once. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said quietly, "and the saddest, both at once." Marcus nodded. "I keep thinking about all the years I spent embarrassed by her, and this whole time, she was the reason I had anything worth being proud of. I don't know how to make up for that." Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "Maybe you don't make up for it. Maybe you just start showing up differently from now on, and let that be enough." It was, Marcus decided, exactly the right answer. 3 weeks later, Once Elaine had been discharged and had regained her strength, Marcus drove down for a weekend visit, his first extended visit in over 5 years. When he pulled into her driveway, the old blue sedan was still parked in its usual spot, rust creeping along the wheel wells, exactly as it had always been. But this time, Marcus didn't feel embarrassment looking at it. He felt something closer to reverence. He walked up, ran his hand along the hood the way he used to as a child, pretending it was a spaceship, and smiled to himself. That evening, over dinner, he told his mother he wanted to help her look for a new car. Not because the old one embarrassed him anymore, but because she'd finally earned the right to stop sacrificing for someone else's comfort and start choosing something for herself. Elaine laughed, waving a hand dismissively at first, the same way she always had. But this time, Marcus didn't let it go. "Mom, you spent 13 years putting every extra dollar into me. Let me put something back into you. Not because I feel guilty. Because I finally understand what you were actually doing this whole time, and I want to be part of taking care of you the way you took care of me." Elaine's eyes glistened again, but this time, she didn't argue. She simply nodded, reaching across the table to hold her son's hand. "Okay, baby," she said softly. "Okay." The Saturday, they finally went car shopping together. Elaine wandered the dealership lot with the careful, almost apologetic hesitation of someone unaccustomed to spending money on herself. She gravitated instinctively toward the smallest, cheapest models on the lot, the ones with the highest mileage ratings and the least amount of features. And Marcus had to gently steer her, more than towards something with a little more comfort. "Mom, you don't have to pick the bare minimum anymore," he said, standing beside a modest but well-equipped sedan with heated seats, a feature Elaine kept eyeing and then dismissing as unnecessary. "You spent 13 years making sure I never had the bare minimum. Let yourself have heated seats. It's not extravagant. It's just warm." Elaine laughed, running her hand along the dashboard almost reverently. "I don't know how to want things for myself anymore, baby. I got so used to wanting things for you instead." Marcus felt his chest tighten at the honesty of that sentence, delivered so simply, without a trace of self-pity. "Then let me want things for you for a while," he said. "Turnabout's fair play." Elaine laughed at that, a real, unguarded laugh that Marcus realized he hadn't heard often enough in recent years, and something about the sound of it settled a small, aching piece of him that had been unsettled since prom night. Elaine finally smiled, really smiled, and settled into the driver's seat, testing the heated seat button with the delighted, slightly embarrassed expression of a woman feeling genuinely warm in more ways than one, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Around that same time, an old email arrived unexpectedly in Marcus's inbox. A wedding announcement from Priya, the girl from high school he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, forwarded through a mutual friend's mailing list. He found himself smiling at the photo, genuinely happy for her, and then, almost involuntarily, thinking back to that dinner all those years ago, the corner pickup, the sprint out the door before anyone could see the car. He thought about how much energy he'd spent that entire relationship, and honestly, that entire adolescence, trying to control what other people saw, rather than appreciating what he actually had. He didn't reply to the email. He simply closed his laptop, walked into the kitchen, and called his mother instead, just to hear her voice, no occasion required. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his mother's driveway again, this time watching her climb into a modest, reliable, brand new sedan. Nothing flashy, nothing that would turn heads in a parking lot, exactly the kind of practical, unglamorous choice Elaine had always preferred anyway. As she pulled out to run to the store, Marcus caught himself smiling at the sight of her taillights disappearing down the street, feeling something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for over a decade. He thought about the crayon drawing, still framed now on his own apartment wall, a stick figure boy and his mother holding hands beside an old car under a lopsided sun. He understood now what that drawing had always meant, even before he understood the sacrifice behind it. It had never been about the car at all. It had been about the person driving it, choosing him, quietly, every single day, without ever once asking to be thanked. 4 years later, Marcus stood in a different parking lot, watching his own 6-year-old daughter, Ellie, climb into the back seat of his practical, unremarkable family sedan after her first day of first grade. As he pulled out of the school lot, he caught sight of a boy a few years older, standing near the entrance, visibly cringing as his mother's aging, dented minivan rattled to a stop in the pickup line, watching his friends notice, watching his face flush red with the particular embarrassment only a child can feel about a parent they haven't yet learned to understand. Marcus watched the whole exchange in his rearview mirror, and something in his chest tightened with recognition so sharp it nearly took his breath away. That night, after Ellie was tucked into bed, Marcus pulled a small wooden frame down from the shelf in his home office. The crayon drawing, preserved now behind glass, a stick figure boy, and his mother holding hands beside an old car under a lopsided sun. He sat with it for a long while, then picked up his phone and called Elaine, now 3 years car-free of the old sedan, but somehow, impossibly, no less herself. "Mom," he said when she picked up, "I saw a kid today, embarrassed by his mom's car in the pickup line. Looked exactly like I probably looked, 100 times, and never once thought about how it might have felt from your side of the windshield." Elaine was quiet for a moment. "You were a good kid, Marcus. You were just a kid. Kids don't know what they can't see yet. That's not a character flaw. That's just how growing up works. You understand your parents backwards, years after you needed to." "I want Ellie to understand things a little sooner than I did," Marcus said. "I want her to know what things cost, even when we don't show her the price tag." Elaine laughed softly on the other end of the line. "Then teach her the way I taught you, baby. Not with lectures, just by loving her so completely that one day, when she's ready, she'll look back and finally understand exactly how much it cost you to make it look effortless." Marcus hung up the phone that night and sat for a long time in the quiet of his office, looking at the crayon drawing, thinking about how long it had taken him to see clearly what had been true the entire time. That the car had never been the story. The car had only ever been the surface, the visible edge of something far deeper running underneath. A decade of second jobs nobody saw, a wedding ring quietly pawned and never replaced, a spiral notebook filled with scared tears and good tears entries, an envelope handed to a stranger's grandmother because, "Pay it forward when you can, that's all I ask." He understood now that his mother's love had never been loud enough to be seen from a school parking lot. It had only ever been deep enough to be felt for the rest of his life, once he finally learned how to look for it. And he understood, too, that somewhere out there, other kids were sitting in the passenger seats of cars they were ashamed of, measuring their parents' love by the wrong currency entirely, by the shine of the paint instead of the years of quiet sacrifice underneath the hood, by what could be seen from the outside instead of what had been given up, unseen, on the inside. He hoped, someday, they'd get the chance to find out the truth a little sooner than he had. He hoped they wouldn't need a hospital bed to learn it. If you've ever misjudged someone's sacrifice because you couldn't see the whole story, drop a heart below and call your mother today just to say thank you.